Hi class, today's lesson is lesson 3-1. Let's take a look at the purpose. The purpose today is to write, compare, and order decimals using place value and number lines. There are no vocabulary terms to define. Let's go to this first example. It says, write each decimal in standard form, expanded form, and word. Now before we get into the actual problems, I do want to show you the examples of standard, expanded, and words. This is standard form. It is the number written as what we would see normally. 1 and 500ths, standard form. Expanded form. Expanded form is when we see the number broken down by place value. Here we have 500ths plus 1 1,000th plus 7 10,000ths. It's expanded by place value. And then words, of course, is simply this. We have 16 and 900ths. All right. Now, before we solve those three problems, let's take a look at this chart. This chart down here is a place value chart. It shows the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s that we're all familiar with. And then it shows the decimal place, or decimals, to the right of the decimal point. I'm going to go ahead and do the first problem using this particular chart. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and copy this chart down, and I'll show you what I want you to copy out of it. I want you to copy the words here, and I want you to copy this decimal point. You don't need to copy down what's inside here, because that's going to become pretty self-explanatory here pretty soon. And I'm going to provide you with one of these charts in class. But for now, for your note-taking, I need you to build these columns and these labels down here. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at 1 and 500ths. Now, since this is in standard form, we need to write it in expanded and in words as well. Let's go ahead and put this in the chart. The 1 is in the ones place, then there's the decimal, then we have the 0 and the 5. Now, if we look at this carefully, the 0 is in the tenths place, and the 5 is in the hundredths place. Notice the TH. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and 10,000ths. Now, how do we place this in expanded form? Well, we write this as 1 plus, now instead of saying 0 tenths, since there's nothing there, we're not going to put 0 tenths, but we're going to go to the 500ths. So we're going to write down 1 plus 500ths. Now that's an expanded form. Now, in terms of words, how would we write that? We would write that as 1. The decimal point, as you can see by this arrow, the decimal point is always referred to when reading it as and. 1 and 500ths. Expanded form, you're expanding it, you're spreading it out, and then in word form. Next, we're going to take the expanded version here in B, and since we've got the expanded version, we need to place it in standard form and in words. Let's start with the standard form first. Usually you'll find with the expanded form that it's in place value order. Here we have 500ths, 1,000th, and 7 10,000ths. So we write that as, well, there's nothing in the ones place, nothing in the tenths place. Then we have a 5 in the hundredths place. Do we have anything in the thousandths place? Yes, we have the 1. And then do we have anything in the the 10,000ths place? Yes, we have the 7. Another way to look at this is use our chart here, or use the chart you just made. We're going to put 500ths right here. We're going to put 1,000ths right here. And then we're going to put 7 10,000ths right here. So what do we get? Well, we get zeros here, 0, decimal point here, zeros here, a 5 here, a 1 here, and a 7 here. That is 517 10,000ths. Now we always read in terms of this last place value, and that 7 is the last number. 517 10,000ths. How do we write that in words? Well, it's 517, just as if there was no decimal point, 517, and then we need to put down 10,000ths. I'm going to go on this next line here, 10,000ths, THS, 517 10,000ths. Okay. Now, the final example of this particular type of problem is, now we've got the words, now we won't need it in standard form and expanded form. Okay. Now, we have 16 and 900ths. Now that and means that's a decimal point right there. Remember that? So we're going to put down decimal point. We know that and's there. 16 is in front of that and. 16 and 900ths. Well, hundredths is right here, and there's going to be 9 of them, so I'm going to put a 9 here and a 0 here to indicate that this is 900ths. 16 and 900ths. Now, how do we write that in expanded form? Well, we write down 10, because that's in the tens place. There's 110, plus 6 ones, plus 0 tenths. But since there's no tenths in there, we don't need to worry about it. We go to the next one, plus 900ths, 0.09. There we have standard form, and here we have the expanded form. All right. Next, Rigel and Betelgeuse are 2 stars in the constellation Orion. The apparent magnitude of Rigel is 0.12. Now, that's the way we would write it, but it's actually called 12 hundredths. This is tenths, hundredths, 12 hundredths. The apparent magnitude of Betelgeuse is 50 hundredths. Which star has a smaller magnitude? Which star appears brighter? Well, what we're doing here is comparing which is the smaller magnitude. Here we have Rigel, which is, I'm going to put an R over here. That's 12 hundredths. And here we have Betelgeuse. Which one is the smaller one? Well, the way we go about it is we look at the place value starting with the far left. Zeros. That's a tie. That doesn't tell us anything. Next place value is the tenths. What does that tell us? Well, we have a 5 in the tenth spot here and a 1 in the tenth spot here. So what that tells us that this is a larger number. Betelgeuse has a bigger magnitude. So which star has a smaller magnitude? Well, it's Rigel. Has the smaller magnitude. Now the question goes, which star appears brighter? Well, in this case, although Rigel has the smaller magnitude, it is the brighter star. Isn't that strange? Rigel is the brighter one. Once again, that can be confusing here, but the smaller the magnitude, the brighter the star. Next. Now, we're going to go ahead and compare and order some decimal numbers. Now, I've got to remember that writing zeros at the end of a decimal does not change the value of the decimal at all. Here we have 3/10. It's the same thing as 30/100, which is the same thing as 300,000. I'll show you what we mean here. So, order decimals from least to greatest. We have 14 and 35/100, 14 and 3/10, 14 and 5/100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place them in kind of a vertical order. Oops. Let me go ahead and correct that. Actually, let me restore this. And I'm going to write 14 35/100. Then I'm going to write 14 and 3/10. Notice I lined up the decimals. And then 14 and 5/100. Now, in order for me to see this more clearly, I'm going to place a 0 at the end of this, because adding a 0 to the end of the decimal does not change the value. So 3/10, which was what we originally had, 14 and 3/10, is the same thing as 14 and 30/100. So we're going to go back to comparing these. Well, obviously the ones are the same. That doesn't tell us anything. The 4s are the same in the one spot. Now we go beyond the decimal and we have a 3, a 3, and a 0. Well, obviously the 14 and 5/100 is the smallest because it's got the 0, the other have 3. So I'm going to go ahead and write down 14 and 5/100. Now we need to go to the next place value to see which is the bigger one here. And when we go to the 100 spot, 5 is bigger than 0, so that means 14 and 3/10 is next, followed by the biggest one, which is 14 and 35/100. Now, if we were to place that in a number line, we'd go ahead and do it this way. This might be 14.05. This would be 14.10, 14 and 15/100, 14 and 20/100, 14 25/100, 14 and 30/100, and 14 and 35/100. So that's what all those tick marks are there. So placing these there, I could see here's 14 and 5/100. 14 and 3/10 is the same thing as 14 and 30/100, and then we have 1435. That's what it looks like. All right, so last thing. Here's your complete the problem. Now you can go back to your place value chart. What I want you to do is I want you to explain these things. All right. number 1, number 2, and number 3 using this place value chart.